Welcome back to American Republic. Hopefully you've taken the Chapter 22 quiz by now. And we're at Roman numeral 3, the New Deal faces opposition. Let's get right to it. Although Roosevelt won the presidency with a large popular vote, there were still many people who opposed him. Conservatives and Republicans feared the growth of the government into the private sector. They believed that the government had overstepped its boundaries and had become too powerful. Supreme Court rulings that rejected some of Roosevelt's policies, like the AAA and the NRA, seemed to suggest that the conservatives must be right. Also, some liberals opposed FDR. Conservatives were not the only ones who opposed Roosevelt's New Deal. Many of these liberals felt that the New Deal had not gone far enough. They wanted to be more socialistic, with the government owning certain industries or providing people with an income. Dr. Francis Townsend wanted the government to provide $200 a month pension to everyone over 60. He desired to create a national sales tax to afford it, and said it would boost the economy because the elderly would be required to spend all of it. So give everyone over 60 $200, they don't have to get a job, and require them to spend that $200. It'll help boost the economy. That was his idea. Huey Long, nicknamed the Kingfish, wanted to tax the wealthy in order to provide a minimum income for the poor. Huey Long was the governor and then senator of Louisiana. If the government taxed the wealthy, that money would go to the poorest people who are not doing anything. In fact, Long even planned on running for president, but will be assassinated before he gets started. And then a third individual, Father Charles Coughlin, wanted a government takeover of certain industries. He was a Detroit priest, and he also had a nationwide radio broadcast. While these men may have been more radical than FDR, because of their criticism, it forced Roosevelt to become more liberal as well as to keep their support. One thing that FDR did do was establish Social Security to aid the elderly. It offered small monthly pensions by giving federal aid to the states for the elderly, as well as funds for unemployment insurance, aid to dependent children, and public health programs. Today, the plan includes Medicare and Medicaid. It was to be financed by a federal tax on wages. The employer pays half, and the employee paid the other half. And it is still in operation today. Those of you who get a paycheck or those people who get paychecks, just ask your folks. If you look at their pay stubs, they can see that a chunk of their money goes to Social Security, among other things. The Wagner Act encouraged the growth of labor unions. By this time, there were millions of workers in the two largest unions, the American Federation of Labor, AFL, and the Congress of Industrial Organizations, CIO. The Fair Labor Standards Act established the first legal minimum wage and maximum hours for workers. The wage was set at 25 cents per hour, and the work week was to be 44 hours. Children under 16 were prohibited from most industries. If you look at your books at page 445, it shows you the history of the federal minimum wage as a chart. Just some fun, interesting ideas. When I first got my, I'd say a first real job, the minimum wage was $5.15. Since then, of course, now the minimum wage is $7.25, and there are even talks of it going even higher. Another important historical event that took place during this time had to do with the Zeppelin known as the Hindenburg. At 803 feet long and 135 feet in diameter, the Hindenburg was one of the largest aircraft ever built. Inside its metal frame were 16 gas cells that could hold more than 7 million cubic feet of hydrogen. At a top speed of 84 miles per hour, the Hindenburg could make the trip from Friedrichshafen, Germany to Lakehurst, New Jersey in just a few days. Passengers aboard the airship traveled in relative comfort. Although the cabins were small and Spartan, the passengers spent most of their time in the ship's other rooms. For example, the airship had a 50-person dining room, a reading and writing room, a smoking room, a lounge with a baby grand piano, and a promenade from which passengers could view the earth below. The Hindenburg made a total of 10 trips to Lakehurst in 1936. However, during its flight on May 6, 1937, something went terribly wrong. The ship was beginning its final descent 200 feet from the ground when flames appeared near the tail. Within seconds, the flames spread over the whole ship, and the Hindenburg crashed tail first to the ground. Of the 97 people aboard, 13 passengers and 22 crewmen died. One ground crew member was also killed. Letter A. The election of 1936. Democrats gained support from blacks, urban immigrants, and workers in this election. The Depression had hit everyone, but the poorest people had been hit the most. Many of the poor believed that it was FDR's plans that kept them from starving. In 1936, 75% of blacks voted Democrat, which, by the way, was a change since the Civil War when most blacks used to vote Republican. Republicans criticized the New Deal because it had overthrown the traditional ways that government had worked. They continued to push that the government should not be taking too much power for themselves and that FDR had overstepped his boundaries. In the election of 1936, it was FDR going for re-election versus Alfred M. Landon. Republicans had lost heavily in recent elections. They lacked a leader and a program to attract voters. Landon was the progressive governor of Kansas. He was the only governor re-elected in 1934, and so the only real hope that Republicans had. Republicans used as their slogan, "America is in peril," and they criticized the New Deal for its overthrow of traditional ways and for betraying its promises to the people. End result, you guessed it, Roosevelt won easily. In fact, Landon only won 2 states, Maine and Vermont. Roosevelt beat him by more than 11 million votes. The Congress elected in 1936 was also heavily Democratic. Another story that took place during this time period, on October 30th, 1938, the Columbia Broadcasting System, CBS, succeeded beyond its wildest expectations in getting listeners' attention. That Sunday evening, the station broadcasted a radio drama titled War of the Worlds, based on a science fiction novel by H.G. Wells. Orson Welles, no relation to the author, and his team of actors performed a dramatization of an alien invasion of Earth. The program began as a fictional musical variety show. It was interrupted at intervals by fictional newscasts with breaking news of the aliens landing around New Jersey and attacking people. At the beginning and throughout the show, the announcer issued notices to clarify that the show was merely a radio drama. However, many people believed the news rather than the disclaimers and panicked. The incident showed the media's power to convince people. There you go again, folks. The media influencing people, even if it's not true story. Letter B. A declining popularity of the New Deal. In an effort to promote more New Deal plans, Roosevelt tried to pack the Supreme Court with new justices. This cartoon that you see in the picture shows what the president is after. He's trying to get the Supreme Court under his thumb, meaning he's trying to control them. The Supreme Court had rejected some of his New Deal plans. Roosevelt had grown tired of the conservative court and brought before Congress a plan that would increase the number of justices. By adding justices that would agree with his plans, Roosevelt would have more control over the government. He wanted to be able to add a new justice every time a justice reached the age of 70 and didn't retire. For the first time, Congress rejected Roosevelt's plan because it would take away the judiciary's independence. And by the way, just to finish that story real quick, in the end, a justice would retire, and then another justice would switch over to the progressive side. So in the end, Roosevelt's going to get what he wants. At least he's going to do it legally rather than trying to cook the books. A recession in 1937, by the way, a recession is a slump in business less serious than a full depression. A recession in 1937 occurred when the government had cut back on its spending. In early 1937, federal money dropped off. The recession was one of the worst in American economic history. It reduced personal incomes and in turn cut the purchasing power that had been artificially sustaining the industry's production. The fact of the matter was it had become evident that the New Deal had only covered up the problems, not brought the U.S. recovery. Simple illustration. Someone who is sleep deprived, what's the solution? Maybe give them a sugar high, right? That'll wake them up. No. The sleep deprived individual, he just needs sleep. He doesn't need more sugar. Well, the same with the New Deal. They just needed to allow the economy to recover, not kickstart it with more government programs, as proved in 1937. That's all the notes that we're going to cover for today. Hope you all have a good rest of the day. Be good, do good. Bye.